They said no woman could survive that place. Not in those mountains. Not against that army. But on that freezing dawn when the sun was just a red bruise rising over the snow, she stood there, alone, her breath fogging the air like a dragon about to breathe fire. The men who watched from behind the ridge had seen battles before. They'd seen heroes, cowards, traitors, and saints, but never someone like her. Her name was Captain Elara Voss, though the soldiers whispered a different one when they thought she couldn't hear, the ghost of Ravenspire. She had earned that name the day her entire battalion vanished under her command, lost in a blizzard during the Northern War. People said she had led them into death. Some said she had survived by betraying them. None of those stories were true, but in war, truth was the first casualty. The morning she stood against the enemy alone was supposed to be her court-martial. Instead, it became her redemption. It began 3 days earlier in a fortress buried in fog. The walls of Greystone Fort were cracked like old bones, its soldiers tired, hungry, and cold. Supplies hadn't arrived in weeks. Morale was worse. And the enemy, a ruthless general named Corvin, was closing in fast with 10,000 men. Inside the dim strategy room, a handful of officers argued over maps. Elara stood silent at the edge of the table, her fingers tracing the outline of the valley. "We can't hold them here," said Colonel Darren, slamming his fist down. "We need to retreat south." Elara's voice cut through the noise. "If we retreat, they'll take the city by dawn." Darren glared at her. "And if we stay, they'll crush us by midnight." Every pair of eyes turned to her. She didn't blink. "Not if they believe we've already fallen." The room fell quiet. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. She explained her plan, madness to most ears. She would lead a decoy attack into the valley, drawing Corvin's full force toward her while the rest of the army escaped through the mountain pass. It was suicide, pure and simple. "Impossible," one of the lieutenants muttered. "It doesn't have to work for long," she said. "Just long enough." Colonel Darren stood, his face pale. "You're asking me to send a captain to die for a delay tactic?" "I'm not asking," she replied softly. "I'm volunteering." They tried to stop her. They argued, shouted, even ordered her to stand down. But she'd already made up her mind. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was her only chance to save her people and to silence the ghosts that haunted her name. That night, as the soldiers prepared to evacuate, Elara gathered a small squad of volunteers, only 20 men, all loyal to her despite the whispers. She didn't tell them the full plan. She couldn't. Some things were better left unspoken. At midnight, they rode out into the valley under a sky full of silent stars. The snow was deep, the air thin and sharp as glass. They reached the ridge overlooking the enemy camp and saw thousands of flickering fires, an ocean of light. Her men grew quiet. Even the bravest among them felt their courage waver. Elara dismounted, her boots sinking into the frost. "Remember," she said, her voice steady, "tonight we don't fight for glory. We fight for time. Every second we hold them here, another child wakes up safe tomorrow." One of the younger soldiers, barely 18, asked, "And what about you, Captain? Who fights for you?" She smiled faintly. "The mountain," she said. "She's always on my side." Before dawn, they struck. From the cliffs, they launched firebombs down into the enemy lines, the explosions tearing through tents and wagons. Chaos spread like wildfire. Corvin's soldiers scrambled in confusion, thinking a full attack was underway. Then Elara charged, her banner whipping through the smoke, her voice rising like thunder. The enemy responded fast. Within minutes, thousands of troops flooded the valley, encircling her position. Still, she pressed on, leading charge after charge, her small band vanishing and reappearing like shadows in the storm. But one by one, her men fell. By the time the sun rose, only 3 were left, then 2, then none. When the last of them fell beside her, Elara stood alone among the burning wreckage. The enemy general himself rode out to meet her, a tall man with eyes like polished steel. "So the ghost fights after all," he said. "You should have stayed dead." Elara wiped the blood from her cheek. "Then you should have brought more ghosts with you," he laughed. "You think you can stand against an army?" "I'm not standing against your army," she said. "I'm standing between you and mine." He raised his sword. "Then die for them." Their blades met in a flash of silver. The clash echoed through the valley like thunder. Corvin was stronger, but she was faster. Every strike, every movement fueled by something deeper than fear or fury. She fought for the fallen, for the forgotten, for the name they tried to bury, but even she couldn't fight forever. A blow caught her shoulder, spinning her to the ground. The world blurred. Snow and smoke mixed in her eyes. Corvin stepped forward, ready to end it. Then something happened that no one expected. The mountains groaned. A rumble rolled through the valley, deep and distant. From the cliffs above, an avalanche broke loose, tons of snow crashing down like the wrath of the earth itself. Elara had planned it all along. The firebombs she'd thrown earlier had cracked the ice ridges just enough. Now nature finished the job. Corvin's army screamed as the avalanche swallowed them whole. Elara staggered backward, barely escaping the edge of destruction. When the roaring finally stopped, the valley was silent, buried under a white shroud. She was the last one standing. Hours later, when the surviving soldiers of Greystone returned, they found her there, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. She didn't speak. She just looked at them with eyes that had seen too much. Colonel Darren dismounted and approached slowly. He stared at the valley below, then at her. You did this?" She nodded once. "They said you went mad," he whispered. "They said you led your men to die." "They died for the living," she said softly. Behind him 1,000 soldiers knelt, not in mourning, but in respect. The woman they had once doubted, once whispered about, now stood as their savior. For the first time in years, Elara felt the weight of her ghosts lift, just a little. But the story didn't end there. Because as the snow settled and the sun bled through the clouds, a single figure crawled out from beneath the avalanche. A man in torn armor, his face pale, his eyes burning with hate. It was General Corvin, alive. He reached for his sword and Elara turned. Corvin's hand trembled as he gripped the hilt of his sword, half buried in the snow. His armor was cracked, his face streaked with frost and blood, but his eyes, those cold, relentless eyes, still burned with the will to kill. Elara froze. Every muscle screamed from exhaustion, but instinct pulled her blade up once more. Around her, the soldiers who had just begun to cheer now fell silent. The air turned still, heavy with dread. He rose slowly, one step at a time, like death itself refusing to lie down. The avalanche had buried thousands, but not him. Somehow he had clawed his way out. He was a monster of war, too stubborn to die. "Not finished yet," he rasped, his breath misting white. "You think you can bury me under snow and stories?" Elara's fingers tightened on her sword. "No," she said softly. "I'll bury you in truth." She limped forward, every step a test of will. Around them, the soldiers of Greystone watched, not daring to intervene. This was no longer a battle between armies. It was the end of something much older, a reckoning written in blood and frost. Corvin charged first, roaring like a beast. Their blades met with a crack that echoed across the valley. Elara parried, stumbled, struck back. Sparks flew. She moved like a shadow, her body broken but her mind sharp, her every motion fueled by something fierce and final. He was stronger. She was smarter. He swung for her neck. She ducked low, twisting the blade upward into his chest. He grunted, staggered, but didn't fall. He caught her arm, slammed her into the snow, the cold knocking the breath from her lungs. The world spun again. "Sky, snow, sky. You fight like a ghost," he growled, pressing his sword against her throat. "But ghosts don't win wars." Her lips curved faintly. "Neither do tyrants." And then she did something no one expected. She let go of her sword. In that instant, Corvin's balance shifted, his blade lowering just a fraction, enough for her to grab the dagger strapped to her boot. Before he could react, she drove it upward into the gap beneath his ribs, once, twice. His eyes widened. He looked down, disbelieving, as blood spread through the snow. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Corvin dropped to his knees. "You," he gasped, his voice fading. "You'll never be remembered." Elara leaned close, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't need to be," and with that he fell. The valley went quiet again. The only sound was the wind, soft and almost gentle now. Elara stood over him, her body shaking, her sword still in hand. Around her, 1,000 soldiers watched in stunned silence. Then slowly, one by one, they raised their weapons in salute, not out of pity. Out of respect. The woman who had once been called a ghost was now something else entirely. Living proof that courage was not the absence of fear, but the will to act in spite of it. She swayed on her feet, exhaustion finally catching up. Darren rushed forward to steady her. You've done enough, Captain. It's over. She shook her head weakly. It's never over. Not for those who remember. They carried her back to the fort where the wounded were tended and the fires lit again. The fortress that had once felt like a tomb now felt alive with hope. Stories spread faster than the wind, of the woman who faced an army alone, who turned the mountain into her ally, who silenced her enemies and her doubts in one final act of defiance. By nightfall, the sky cleared. The stars came out bright and sharp, scattered like silver across black silk. Elara sat by the ramparts, her arm bandaged, her sword laid across her knees. Colonel Darren approached, setting down a cup of broth beside her. They're calling you the Guardian of Greystone now, he said with a small smile. She chuckled softly, though her voice was hoarse. They called me worse things before. History will remember this day, he said. They'll remember you. Elara's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. History remembers generals, not ghosts. Then maybe it's time the ghosts got their due. The wind carried his words away, and for a while they sat in silence. The campfires below flickered like a constellation of their own, and from the distance came the faint sound of laughter, the laughter of soldiers who finally believed they might live to see peace again. But even peace has its shadows. That night, as Elara tried to rest, a messenger arrived from the capital. A sealed letter bearing the royal crest. Darren handed it to her carefully. She broke the seal and read. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened just a little. What is it? He asked. Orders, she said. They want me back in the capital. Command wants to review my tactics. Darren frowned. Review after everything you just did? Elara folded the letter and tucked it away. They don't like soldiers who win without permission. She rose, wincing from the pain in her side. Tell the men I'll leave at dawn, and tell them this fortress is theirs now. Guard it well. He hesitated. You think they'll punish you? She gave a small smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. They can't punish a ghost. The next morning she rode out alone, no escort, no ceremony. Just her horse, her blade, and the cold wind at her back. The soldiers lined the walls as she passed, saluting in silence. Some whispered prayers, others whispered her name. As she disappeared into the mist, one young soldier turned to Darren. Sir, he said quietly, do you think she'll come back? Darren looked out toward the pale horizon. I think she never really left, he said. People like her, they become part of the story, part of the mountain. Weeks later, when news reached the front lines that the king himself had commended her bravery, the fortress erupted in cheers, but she never returned to claim the medal. Some said she vanished in the wilderness, searching for the spirits of her fallen men. Others claimed they saw her years later, riding through the northern snows, helping lost travelers find their way home. No one truly knew. But every winter, when the wind howled through the valley and the snow began to fall heavy on Greystone, the soldiers would swear they heard a voice in the storm, a woman's voice, calm and fierce, whispering, hold the line, and so they did, because sometimes a single soul can carry the weight of 1,000 hearts. Sometimes standing alone is what makes others stand together. And though she never sought glory, the name Elara Voss lived on, not in marble, not in books, but in the unspoken courage of those who remembered her. In the end, her greatest victory wasn't the battle she won, but the belief she left behind, that one person's resolve, even in the face of impossible odds, can change everything. That's how legends are born, not from power, but from the quiet strength of those who refuse to fall.